Hi, I'm Konrad Ejbich, and this is Pro and Con. Today, my guest is Grant Burge, founder and winemaker of Grant Burge Wines. That's in the Barossa Valley in Australia. Now, welcome to Toronto.
Thank you, John.
And welcome,
Konrad.
And welcome to Pro and Con.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. You look like a pretty healthy looking guy.
Yes.
Tell me, when you're on the road, do you eat differently from when you're at home? I find sometimes traveling plays a little bit of fun with my system.
Oh yes, well, I try and get as much exercise as I can, so I like to try and work out a bit while I'm travelling, because and probably we don't eat as much because a lot of the time you're in planes or flying around or travelling and so forth. And
steak tartare.
Obviously, part of the job is that you do entertain, so that means you're having lunches or dinners with people. So yeah, you've got to look after that pretty well, actually.
Do you avoid certain foods? Steak tartare, oysters, that kind of thing on the road?
No. Unfortunately, I grew up in a household where I'd eat everything put in front of me, so I'm certainly not fussy about food. But yes, I limit, try and limit. But I mean, sometimes you get confronted with some unbelievable dishes, and it's really hard to
hard
turn
to say
away.
no.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's get right down to it. In this new book, The History of Australian Wine, you recall a story wherein you received a pretty cold reception in Britain to your wines. In fact, I think what you said was, not only did they not want our wine, they didn't even want to taste it.
That was a long time ago. That was in 1975, and I'd been, well, it was part holiday and it was part business. Our company that I worked for in those days was a company called Southern Vales Co-op. And
which you created?
No. This was a cooperative. This was, I was young, I'd only been winemaking in 1975, sort of 5 years. So I was new into the industry, but I worked for a cooperative that made everything imaginable. And one of the products we made under license was Jabonnet. And we were going on this holiday, so we're going to France, and they said we'll definitely go and see the Jabonnet people. And then I was very passionate about Cabernet Sauvignon, so I was going on down to Bordeaux. We had some great introductions down there. But while we were spending some time in London, they also got an introduction. I've forgotten the name of the. It's not actually. It was a big chain of stores. It's not there in London anymore. But
they probably failed because they didn't have your wines.
Well, probably. But anyway, we sent the wines forward to them, and the Australians, I mean, the people I worked for, through other people, had introductions, so it wasn't as if they didn't know anything about us. But when I arrived, we had a polite conversation and, coffee or tea or whatever. So it wasn't just sort of in the door and out the door. But when it got down to the business, they said, look, there's absolutely no interest in Australian wine. Not only do we not want to buy it, there's no need for us to even taste the wine. So we had the wine there, but they didn't even want to taste it with me. There's absolutely no interest.
That's about the same time that that most famous of the Monty Python skits about Australian wine came up. No, I thought that was very funny. How did you feel about that?
Oh, no, I thought they were very funny as well. Yeah, no, they were good.
They're actually still very funny.
Yeah.
You're a fifth generation winemaker, well, a grape grower. Your great-great-grandfather, John Burge, planted grapes. He was a tailor. Your grandfather established Wilsford Winery during the Great Depression, but you started your own winery. Why did you avoid entering the family business?
Well, that's an interesting story because, see, Australia made table wines in the first 60 years, from the 1840s to 1900s. Then part of the Commonwealth, so we sold a lot of wine to England. And so the fashion was fortified wine, so it became fortified. My grandfather couldn't sell his grapes in 1928, so he actually started making wine, which is fortified. My father and uncle took over that business in the 50s, and we continued. When I left school and went to Roseworthy in the late 60s, started out in 1970, my mother, the reason I never joined the family business because my mother wouldn't allow it. And that was because she could see that after the Second World War, with all the European migration in Australia, the whole fabric of wine was going to change from fortified to table wine. And so she said to me, look, you know, your father and uncle are not going to change, they'll stick to fortified to their dying day. You'll be totally frustrated, and so don't join the family business. You go out and get yourself a job and learn table wine making. And I mean, I won't tell you what I thought at the time, but she did me a great favour, actually.
No, I want to know what you thought about it at the time.
No, well, I wasn't very happy with it.
Okay.
And I wouldn't repeat what I would have actually thought of it. But that was at the time. But years later, I mean, she did me the greatest favour of all time to advise me to go out and make my way. I mean, I remember saying to my father, well, don't expect me to come back here when I'm 45 and you want to retire. I want to sort of, get going now. And of course, we were just talking about it in the car. By the time I was 26, I'd actually bought my own winery.
Which was
Krondorf.
Krondorf,
yes.
and then you later sold it to Mildara.
And
then in '99 you bought it back.
Yes. You wouldn't really call it selling it. It wasn't a willing sale. We were.
You lost it.
Yeah, we lost it. When I say I was 26 and I bought my own winery, I had a large shareholder in the winery. There was Ian Wilson, there was another winemaker, and myself, and 4 other businessmen actually bought Krondorf. But we took the keys over on the 20th of January 1978, which was my birthday, and I was 26 years old that year. And I mean, that created huge publicity itself because we were so young, no one could understand how we could buy a winery at that age. And then then after to back that up, we actually won a heap of trophies in the next 3 years and won virtually every trophy imaginable to wine in those days. And Krondorf, we probably sold 10,000 cases in our first year, and then the next year it was 20, and the next year it was 40, and then it was 80, and then 160. We had 100% growth year on year and year on year. And by 1983, we were just so tight for capital because wine is just such a capital-intensive business that we went public and we raised $10 million to finance the growth of our business. And then, of course, once we did that, we opened it up to the public on the stock market. And then in January 1986, Mildara just came out of the blue and made an offering, hostile takeover for the company.
The problems of having a public company.
Yeah, exactly. And Mildara became Mildara Bluss a few years later, and then Foster's bought them, and then Foster's bought South Corp in the early 2000s.
All those guys lost control of their own wineries.
Yeah, exactly.
But you bought it back.
Well,
did you just buy the brand instead of the property?
No, what actually happened was because we lived in the company house next door, I stayed. They bought us out. They wanted me to stay. I became the technical director, gradually negotiated to buy my house back, which was next door. But there was an agreement that if I were to sell the house, they had the first option to buy it, and I negotiated that if they were to sell the winery, I had the first option to buy the winery. Well, 13 years later, after we were well into Grant Birch Wines, we'd actually even bought another winery because we didn't build a winery to start with. We basically paid another winery to use their facilities, and I did that for a few years, and then we ended up buying that winery. It was the Basileau Winery in Tanunda. And then in '99, Foster's approached us and said that they were going to build a huge, big new facility at Wolf Bluss, and they didn't need a lot of their smaller wineries, so they're offering them for sale. And after a long toing and froing, we ended up buying it back.
You bought the brand as well as the property?
No, they wouldn't sell the brand. And in fact, in a way, I'm glad, because the brand no longer exists, and we'd sort of successfully established the Burge brand.
Right.
So
I don't be troubled with that stuff.
Well, I didn't want to, and to pay money for it and complicate things. I decided it wasn't available anyway, so we didn't have to think about it too much.
Sure. You've been called one of the most innovative wine producers in Australia. Tell me about some of your innovations and how you came about figuring them out.
Are we talking about wine, or yeah, we're talking about wine.
What else is there?
Well, I think that my greatest innovation really was to develop a wine business the size of it is, and still own it. The real innovation of working out how to actually finance a wine business is probably, I think, one of my greatest achievements.
No, we're not talking about creative accounting, are we?
Not creative, no. It's actually working out how to. Because when you build a brand and you got to put stock down, you just got to put a huge amount of cash into the business, and to actually create cash flow on one side, to actually make money, to actually then reinvest in your brand is one of the most difficult parts. But in winemaking terms, no, I've done quite a few things. I mean, in the early days, there was a big scare with histamines in red wine, and red wine, all of it, histamines were going to give you a headache. So there was a big downturn in red wine in Australia. So it was very hard to sell the wine. So we had to work out ways of making lighter, more elegant, more delicate red wines. Also, taxation came in, and all the accountants wanted to sell wine a lot faster, and there was no incentive to hold it. We wanted to get it on the market as soon as you could. So we got onto this technique of rather than finishing the fermentation in the fermenter and then in a tank, and cleaned up your wine before you actually went into barrels, we actually took the red wine straight out of the fermenter, put it into brand new barrels, and what we found there that was, apart from the style at the time was a lot lighter, we found that this was a way of really integrating the wine and actually getting the wine far more approachable at a younger age. So we could bottle wines at 18 months, 15 months, and within a couple of months in bottle we could have them out on the market. And they were youthful, but they were very, very approachable and well integrated. And probably Ian Wilson and I, Wolf Blass, were the first to really embrace that sort of style of winemaking. Certainly Max Schubert with Grange had actually developed the new oak and everything, because the wineries in the 70s, 2% of wine might go into new oak. That was a very big new thing. But anyway, that practice of finishing and fermentation oak, everyone in Australia does that. It was a totally new thing back in the 70s. In the 90s, we went to Rhone Valley because we were trying to look at GSM wines and sort of
Grenache,
Syrah, Mourvèdre. They've only really, even though we've got tremendous old wines in the Barossa, that's a relatively new style of wine. And we went to the Rhone, and one of the techniques that we were told about was extended maceration, and we brought that technique back to Australia. And really, this is where you actually finish the fermentation, leave the skins in and the wine together in the fermenter, and leave it for up to a month, 35 days, to really get a lot more sort of structure and savouriness into the...
Change the nature of the tannins.
Yes, it does.
So there's softer tannins.
Yes, and also changes the fruit. Grenache, which is a big component of that wine, can be fairly, for confectionery, quite lollyish, and with leaving it on the skins, you you tend to lose that sort of confectionery character and get beautiful perfume in your fruit and get more of the rose petal type fruit in the wine. And from structurally, the tannins, as you say, and I have been explaining the history of it, but I couldn't explain it to you now. But when you first put the wine on the skins and leave it there, it gets quite tannic. And apparently these are short chain tannins. And then when you leave it on there for a period of time, you know, anything up to 35 days, you lengthen the chain of tannins, and this is a lot softer.
This is what Michel Chapoutier was telling me 20 years ago.
Yeah,
about the same one, right?
He would know more about it than me in the sense of the chemistry, but we certainly know what it does to the wine. And yes, it's a technique that. Funnily enough, I tried this technique in 1975, but it was probably more on Shiraz and Cabernet, and that was at McLaren Vale, this cooperative. And you know, the first 5 days or so on the skins, the wine came out so tannic and bold. I really got nervous. I was only a young winemaker, thought I'd be fired, so I actually took it out of the fermenter, pressed it, and sort of blended it away with a whole lot of
worst thing you could do.
Other wines, and never said anything about it. So I wasn't ever game to try that ever again. But which, you're right, was the worst thing. So you had to, and that's what they explained to me in France. You must have fortitude and actually keep it on time, and it gradually softens down.
Well, that's what they say, is the wine gets better with time. You just have to leave it there and it gets better.
And also the other thing is it's quite lazy and skinsy when you actually run it off out of the fermenter and you think, oh, I've lost a lot of fruit and so forth. But, you know, amazingly enough, 6 months' time, when you've got the wines cleaned up and they've been away from the skins for a while, you can't tell the difference between what was extended macerated or not. I mean, you can by deduction. What you do is you look at the better structured wines, and you usually, well, not usually, you'll always find that they are the wines that are extended maceration. But by the bouquet, you wouldn't better tell. I mean, they lose all of that skinsy laziness and clean up, and they got beautiful fruit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. When I hear Hunter Valley, I think of Chardonnay. When I hear Coonawarra, I think of Cabernet. Mm-hmm. When I hear Barossa, I think of Shiraz.
Yes.
What is it about the Barossa Valley that makes it particularly suitable for Shiraz? I mean, we're tasting Grant Burge Summer's Chardonnay today. I'm going to talk about that in a second. But you're really a specialist in Shiraz. I think you're best known for that. Right?
Yes. Barossa's an interesting area because we've got two areas. We've got the Barossa Valley, which is the main valley, 220 to 260 metres above sea level. We get about a 23-inch rainfall. The grapes are picked in the middle of February, March, early April. Then over to the east, we've got the Barossa Ranges, and then we've got another area called Eden Valley. Mm-hmm. It's got its own GIC, but the summation of the two is called the Barossa. Now, Eden Valley is 450 to 550 metres above sea level. It's a smaller valley.
It's a little bench above it.
Yes, there's a bench above it, and you get plus 30-inch rainfall there, and the grapes are picked right at the end of March, April, early May. So it's cooler, finer styles, and certainly a lot later. Now that gives the Barossa a huge ability to make quite a range of wines, a lot more than a lot of other districts. Yes, we are known for Shiraz, very Mediterranean climate, get all our rain in the winter, spring, early summer, but virtually the summer we get no rain unless we get a thunderstorm, and then it starts raining again, you know, late in the fall. So you've got and it gets quite warm as well. Not all the time. I mean, everyone talks about, this is on the floor of the valley, everyone talks about, oh, Barossa quite warm, but I mean, last year we only had 7 days over 36 degrees. I mean, that's the old 100 Fahrenheit, so it was a very mild year. We don't always get a lot of hot weather, although we can get hot weather if in the right, occasionally. And I think Shiraz really just loves that sort of total climate. It's got a huge foliage, so it doesn't get sunburn or anything like that. Of course, it can do as the vines get older and they lose their foliage. You can get a bit of sunburn, but rarely you get sunburn. They quite enjoy the warmer type weather, and as a variety, you know, whereas Cabernet does not like the heat, and so it's just it really does suit the conditions.
And in the Eden Valley, where this comes from, I think I saw a video that you did a few months ago, and you were holding up pieces of quartz.
Yes.
And what's the effect of the quartz on the wine?
Well, I think it gets a real minerality in the wine, but that's an interesting profile there, because it's quite light soil on top, but down in the profile there's actually a big layer of quartz. So it's an incredibly good soil because it's got very good drainage. And then you get down into red and even yellowy sort of clays when you get quite deep. But you've got a nice profile with the quartz in it. Now I'm not really sure exactly in formation how that actually ever occurred, but it's got a really good. The drainage in that country is really good because of that beautiful quartz in the. It's like having a big drain underneath it.
So it's more about how it's fractured as opposed to what chemistry
contributes to the the roots would be down in the quartz. The reason that quartz has been brought to the surface is because when they would have ripped the rows before they planted it, they would have brought a bit of that
brought a bit of that
quartz up. And also, I think where I was standing, the irrigation line went through there, so no doubt we've trenched along there and brought up quartz onto the surface. But normally you don't actually see, unless there's a sort of breakaway or a washout or something, you don't actually see the quartz normally on the surface.
Right, right. Now this wine, your Grant Burge Summers Chardonnay, it's pretty rare that somebody dedicates a wine to their accountant.
Well, he was a lot more than the accountant. I mean, Miles actually was our family accountant for sort of 3 generations.